There's one thing running to win in your seat, but there's another thing forming government. The UAP itself thinks it can form government. Is that really possible?
Look, absolutely, is it possible? Is it easy? Absolutely not. Um, but saying that, if you look at the polls, it's not going to be easy for either Liberal or Labor. Everyone's talking about the fact that their polling is dropping, and there are issues with there. No one's happy with the government previously. Albo hasn't been doing too well in the press. So I think it's really opened up. I mean, the last 2 years, we've got a lot of people who are disillusioned with the traditional parties looking for change. So I think there's a fantastic opportunity out there, not just to win the seat, but to win government or form government, or even possibly form a coalition with some other freedom parties, possibly the Nationals, or even if we become the opposition, or a strong crossbench where we can influence policy.
But at the same time, and while we know it is theoretically possible, and same goes for One Nation, given you're running in 100 151 electorates,
Yep.
like statistically, I don't think we've seen a government, for ages when it was not Liberal, Coalition, or Labor. Does a party that has, does a party like the UAP actually stand a chance bigger than like 0.1% here? Like, realistically?
Honestly, I believe so. I mean, if you've looked at, so I come from an IT background. I spent 10 years in IT. I've got a degree in information technology. So I looked at the Google statistics. If you actually look at what the people are actually researching and looking up in regards to the parties, we've actually forged ahead of both the Liberal and Labor parties. And I think it's because, particularly once we launched our policies, we had a lot of people going, well, what's this about? So they started looking into it. And I think as people get to see the policies and understand that our policies are about protecting Australia, this protecting the Australian economy, but more importantly, putting dollars back into the pockets of the voters and the citizens of Australia. So I think there's a great chance. I think the swing is coming, and every week it seems to get stronger and stronger.
There are, of course, a lot of talk, or today there is a lot of talk, rather, about preferences. Now, I know, obviously, I'll preface this: only voters choose preferences, but of course, parties will
Parties have
recommend, and the UAP
recommended,
will
of
recommend.
course.
The UAP is definitely preferencing the Liberals over Labor in a number of seats. That's pretty much walking back a promise to put the majors
Well,
last, to quote the leaders.
if
How are you preferencing or recommending preferences in your electorate?
so, you have, obviously you have to preference every single seat, because you've got to fill out the whole ballot on the Green House of Representatives. On the Senate, we don't even put in any of the majors, no Liberal, Labor, Greens. On the Senate, we're only preferencing the Freedom parties. The majority of our seats have the Liberal, Labor, Greens last on the ballot. And the position with Liberal and Labor is kind of switched. It's about 60% of the seats are Liberal, about 40% of the seats are Labor, where they're on top of each other, still on the bottom of the ballot. But the way people consider that, if Liberal's on top of Labor at the bottom, they consider that a Liberal preference. If Labor is on top of Liberal, they consider that a Labor preference. So my seat, they've got Liberal, Labor, Greens at the bottom, but Labor is the preferenced seat. Now, my seat is one of the rare seats, well, not rare, it's starting to happen more, where Liberal and Labor are actually preferencing each other at the top of the ballot, which kind of makes you wonder whether the Westminster two-party preferred system really is in play when the two parties are preferencing each other.
Sure, but there are definitely examples where we have seen, and I'm going to quote the Sydney Morning Herald here, that in one case in
Yep.
the seat of Chisholm over in Melbourne, the UAP candidate has basically recommend voters put Gladys Liu, the incumbent Liberal, in third, and the Labor a candidate 11th. So is that still not kind of recommending and just walking back on that promise that we've seen so strongly from your party and from Craig Kelly and from Clive Palmer to quote unquote put the majors last?
Well, look, I mean, the majority of seats, as I said, about 99% of the seats, we've done that. The reality is, both the majors' last campaign has worked too well. Liberal and Labor have gotten so concerned about it, as my seat was an example, and they've done it on a few other seats where they're literally preferencing each other at the top of the ballot, which would mean that no independent or minor party could ever win government if they preference each other. So there had to be some concessions made with a couple of seats to try and prevent them doing that across the board.
Yeah, and of course I'll remind everyone at home, only voters choose preferences, not parties, but of course how to vote cards, they still come into play in a number of areas. Look, I guess the UAP since 2013, only 2013 was when your party actually had some success on a federal level in between 2013 and the 2016 elections. Now, since that time, the UAP has obviously gained a number of fans, but also a number of people who initially supported them and have just gone against them. Why do you think people should vote for the UAP?
Well, look, I believe we need change. I think the current governments that have been placed over the last decade or so haven't done much different. I mean, if you look at the last 2 years, they both voted and supported each other's on the main issues, and they're not really doing anything different. And I think we really need change. If we want to address our economy, none of the majors are addressing paying off the $1 trillion debt that's just kind of being left behind. And again, I think what voters need to do is go down, look at the policies, go to each of the parties, whether it's Liberal, Labor, Greens, United Australia, have a look at the values, ask, do the values match how you feel, and do you feel the party still represents the values they claim to use? And if you feel that's right, follow the party. If you don't, then you need to have a look at which party represents the values that you most feel you want to see in Parliament representing you.
Politicians and candidates talk about truth often, but I guess there are some people who rightly or wrongly say that the UAP spreads misinformation. There are documented examples of your party spreading falsehoods on a number of issues, and I know you yourself posted and then deleted a video of someone you claim was Shane Warne's son, but was actually a far-right extremist. Do you think these kind of examples of when your party does actually spread some blatant misinformation damage the reputation of the UAP?
Look, honestly, we all make mistakes. My particular one was I was fed the information from several different sources, which I thought were correct. Once I realized they were wrong, one of the things I did is I removed that and I admitted my mistake. I mean, that's one of the things we're willing to do. Every party makes mistakes. Every politician gets it wrong. The question is, can you admit that you've made the mistake and change it? Craig Kelly's done the same thing. He used to say, no to a Bill of Rights, and he now realises we do need a Bill of Rights. And he's admitted he was wrong, and we need to change that. So the question is, you do know that they make mistakes, but will they address those mistakes afterwards?
But there's one example, like the UAP claims it had 3 former prime ministers in its party. I mean, that's wrong, and that's still up on your party's website. That is just blatantly false.
Well, that's related to the name, the United Australia Party. The United Australia Party has had 3 previous prime ministers.
But it's a different
Obviously,
United Australia Party. It's not the same party.
Of course, it's a large gap in between, but it is still technically the United Australia Party which had those prime ministers.
Is it though? Because this one was registered in either 2012 or 2013 under Palmer
I'm
United.
not saying it up. It's not. I'm saying it is still the United Australia Party.
Sure. Okay. I guess just finally, I want to just get to a local issue for you. Or what are rather the issues you think are important to locals in your electorate specifically? Because there are big ones national that the UAP focus on. But what about for you in an electorate where you've only got 5 candidates, fairly small for pretty much any electorate this election, where we've seen a record number of House of Representatives candidates. What issues do voters really care about, in your opinion?
Well, honestly, the way I look at it is the issues that affect me. So I'm a business owner. My business employs numerous people, and it's now struggling because of what's happened. So we need to find a way to help small businesses get a boost and get back the economy growing because the small businesses employ the most amount of people in Australia. I'm a homeowner as well, so mortgage stress, um, getting more money in my pocket so I can feed my family and pay my mortgage. I think they're the important things, is ensuring that the people in the community have the money to do what's necessary to just survive, because obviously at this time, with people losing jobs, with small businesses closing down, with mortgage rates going up, it's going to get harder and harder just to feed your family, let alone pay your mortgage.
We'll leave it there. Thanks very much for your time and for joining us here on 6 News.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Leo.